And we will go ahead and switch over to Britt now for his presentation.
Well, to begin with, I'm a photographer and a filmmaker who is used to being behind the camera, not in front of it. So I would say that as I look at myself as being a legitimate, worthy keynote speaker, that's probably about as many of you as would look at Donald Trump being a legitimate, worthy president. Or even some of you, to keep it even, would look at Joe Biden as being a legitimate, worthy president. So I'll do my best here. As you can see from the title, I dubbed this my adult scavenger hunt because that's what it felt like. My first state high point happened naturally, of course. It was Mount Elbert in 2008 when chasing the 14ers. And I finished those 2.5 years later. And in that process, I learned about the unranked 14ers. And so I put that on the list and finished those in 2012. And then I also learned about the centennials. And I completed the list of the highest 100 in Colorado in 2014. So as I was wrapping up the centennials, everybody was asking me, what's next? What's going to be your next goal? And I had heard from other mountaineers this thing called the State Highpoints. And so that intrigued me. And I decided to go for that list. So Greg Long, remember on Mount Bancroft when I said I was going over to Perry Peak and you called me a peak bagger. I think I've transcended that, and I guess I've become a list bagger. So I had a job in Rapid City, South Dakota in April 2013, and instead of driving there, we had a big snowstorm. So I went ahead and drove it instead of flying it, and that worked out because I could go after this state high point after the work was completed. And that was Harney Peak in South Dakota at 7,242 feet. It's in the Black Hills National Forest, commonly known as the Black Hills of South Dakota, which is actually a beautiful area. And I used the Sylvan Lake approach, which is in Custer State Park. And since I was solo, I had to break all that trail myself. It was about 4 miles one way, so 8 miles round trip, which was a good amount of work. And right up near the fire tower, it was really deep and really hard to get through all that sugar snow. But I made it and swam up to the summit and completed my first one after kind of thinking about going after the list. Harney Peak has now been changed in 2016 under some controversy, and it's renamed Black Elk Peak today. So Greg, you also once told me in one of your trip reports or in hams to always have a secondary purpose to all of your climbing trips. Because if you don't get the summit, then the trip's not gone to waste because you got other things that you can accomplish. And that stuck out to me as a really good idea. And so that's part of what I've been able to accomplish. I had a trip to Tulsa, Oklahoma, a business conference I was attending. And so I intentionally drove it to be able to go after another state high point. And this is Mount Sunflower, where I wrote in my trip report that the net vertical gain was a -1 foot when you step out of the car. After my conference in Tulsa, I drove to the high point of Arkansas. I had an enjoyable time tent camping the night before and was able to be up there close in the forest and make the summit at sunrise. After leaving Mount Magazine and driving in the backcountry roads through Arkansas, I came across this. How many of you remember Smokey Bear? Well, did you know that this wildlife prevention campaign is the longest running public service announcement in the United States history? It started 76 years ago in 1944. So I continued driving south, did the backcountry roads through Arkansas, which was interesting to say the least. And I planned to go to South Texas to visit my parents. And so I picked up Louisiana's Mount Driscoll along the way, and then done another tent camp out before getting to my folks down on the coast of Texas. And then after visiting them, turned around, headed north for Guadalupe Peak, 8,749 feet. And this is way more of a mountain than you would expect in Texas, which is mostly flat. It's in the Guadalupe Mountains National Park. And I was doing this in the springtime in March, and that's a great time when the spring flora is in its peak. So the views are quite awesome actually on this mountain, because it has close to 3,000 vertical feet of gain, which was actually way more than I was expecting. And on the summit, there's a metal pyramid that marks the high point, erected in 1958 by American Airlines. It's a 6-foot high stainless steel marker that commemorates the carriers of the transcontinental airmail. After Texas, coming on my way back home to Colorado, stopped and picked up Black Mesa in Oklahoma. And as you can see, this is number 7 on my adult scavenger hunt. So I'll stop for a second and say, for me to reach the goal of all 50 summits, all 50 state high points, I knew I was going to need to learn some new skills, i.e. learning about glaciers and how to do rope travel and dealing with huge crevasses. And so this is actually when I finally got around to joining the CMC, when I took HAMS. And this is where I learned the skills to do rope and glacier travel. And this is where I became confident enough to climb Mount Rainier. But first, this is Mount Hood in Oregon. I partnered with my assistant HAMS instructor, who actually wanted to do Mount St. Helens. And so I agreed to do that one with her if she would do Hood with me. And so that's how we approach this. This is Devil's Kitchen on the way to the summit of Mount Hood, which has the stinky sulfur smell, because these volcanic gases, they smell like rotten eggs, to be honest. And Mount Hood has this notorious Bergstrom, which actually was not a problem. You can just go right around it to the side, which is what we did as we ascended the Pearly Gates route. But this is the crux. We had to climb a complete vertical ice wall. And Kelly wasn't so sure. And yet I reminded her that in our HAMS class, we practiced this. We did a climb with no tools, and then we did a climb with just one mountaineering axe. And so I said to her, come on, let's do this. We know we can do this. And so sure enough, we did it. We climbed that with only one hybrid ice axe. And it worked out perfectly well, and we made it up over that ice wall and made the summit. And on this summit, it was really cool to see that light shining through that ice wall. And to the north, you can see 3 other volcanoes, Mount Adams on the right, Mount Rainier in the middle, and Mount St. Helens, what's left of it, on the far left. So this is with my partner, Kelly, and Mount Hood was actually deceiving. I initially was thinking it's only an 11er, but it's 5,350 feet of gain to get it. So after Hood, this was the real reason of our trip, was to go for Mount Rainier. And we ended up doing the Disappointment Cleaver route from Paradise, and made the 5,000 vertical feet up to Camp Muir, where we camped. And it's just beautiful on the lower elevation, but the look and feel changes quickly. And so after camping at Camp Muir at 10,000 feet, we moved up to Ingram's Flat. And this photo shows the jaw-dropping depth of the snow just below our camp, our second camp. And this Rainier is otherworldly. It's just almost beyond comprehension after climbing only in Colorado. And this photo is probably hard to get the perspective, but if you look at the size of the people on the trail there, and then look at the depth of that crevasse, that thing's got to be over 100 feet deep, maybe even 200. And here I took a selfie stepping over one of the crevasse bridges. And then our HAMS graduating class of 2015. And I actually ended up taking HAMS with the Denver group. And so this was my high point number 15 with our CMC HAMS banner there. And I will say HAMS was invaluable to gain the training and the experience to be able to do this. And Peter Kent took this photo, and I just love it. And that was actually, I was coming back down just a few feet because we were taking a break to stop and enjoy the sunrise. And he took that picture, and I got that one on my wall as a memory. So some honorable mention peaks. This is Kings Peak in the far back, the darkest one in the middle at 13,554. And we camped at Dollar Lake here, which was absolutely awesome. And it's a great peak and a great wilderness area. This is Bora Peak in Idaho at 12,266 feet. And I got that one in August 2016. And this was another major highlight because these are actual real mountains and real climbs like a lot of the state high points aren't. But Wyoming and Montana, as Hoot was saying before we got started at our meeting, these are beautiful, beautiful areas. And I love them because they require multi-days of backpacking in to get there. And this is Island Lake in the Wind River Range. And so we approach Granite Peak from the west side, from Pinedale, because as I did my research, it seemed like the west side was far more beautiful than the east side coming from Dubois. And this is the Titcomb Lakes up high, and in the far back upper right is the saddle that we went over, and in Dark 30. And we actually did a reconnaissance that night to get our bearings so we would go up the right spot in the middle of the night. And that worked out. We made it just exactly where we were supposed to be. And this is Granite Peak from the top of that saddle from the previous photo. And believe it or not, there actually is some small glaciers on this mountain. And while it isn't Rainier, there is some frozen ice in there and even a Bergstrom. And this is like the crux move, which can oftentimes be melted out and impossible to get over. But we still had a snow bridge, and this is Sean Wolf making his way up and over, which was at the end of its life cycle in late August here, because when I was leading coming back down, I actually punched right through 2 different times on that bridge with my legs sticking through underneath. So glad it didn't collapse on us. And here's right up near the top, near the summit before taking the final ridge over. And like Hoot said, this is one of the most beautiful areas and peaks on my State High Point journey. It took us 6 days, 4 days of hiking and 2 days of driving, and 42 miles round trip. And it was one of the best. And equally so, here's Montana's Granite Peak trip. The terrain looks very similar. And again, it's a long round trip, and I really enjoy being able to split up the trips and go in with approach days and campouts, and not just up and down like a lot of people, and like I used to do on the 14ers, just run and go get them and come back home. But the campouts make it enjoyable. And this is right below the face of Granite Peak, and Granite's 12,799 and quite long on the approach. But after a 3:30 a.m. start, we got to the difficult section right about sunrise, which was my intention. And this is high above the skytop Lakes Basin, which is also a very remote, beautiful area. However, we came to a crux move, and this spot proved to be more than was anticipated. I thought it was going to be a simple class 3 move. But we all concurred it was at least class 4, maybe even low class 5 to get up over this tough spot. Plus the rock still had some verglass, even though this was in late August. So I'm guessing it's got ice year round, which is why there's this piece of webbing, which is usually left in there. But it was in horrible shape, so we didn't touch it. And that affected our decision on our down climb. So as we climbed through this crux area, we were all thinking, how are we going to get back down this? It's much harder than these photos make it look. And if you can kind of judge by the height of those guys, those rocks at the bottom are a good 30 or 40 feet down. So it's a no slip zone. But we made the summit, and beautiful day, cloudless day. And but don't let this 12er fool you either. It's a significant peak with a very long approach. However, beautiful scenery and views. But back on the crux, we didn't want to do the down climb. I brought my 30-meter rope. And so rappelling down this proved to be very smart and an easy way to get down and over this sketchy move. And we used webbing as our diaper slings in lieu of taking harnesses, and used a munter hitch since none of us had a ATC or a rappel device. And from having taken some CMC classes, I learned how to and remembered how to do the rappelling using the munter hitch. So that was quite useful. And that's me on rappel coming down. But the best part of this state high pointing was giving me and my wife an excuse to go on the road together. So one of our trips take us to Charles Mound in Illinois. And the reason I point this one out, if you're wanting to climb the Illinois State High Point, it's on private property. So you need to go the times that they're open, and they are only open the first weekend of June, July, August, and September. And the third thing you need to know is that you can only climb during daylight hours. So they asked you to park at the road, and then it was a long way. Actually, it might have been a full mile up the road to go to where you got to get to the back part of their property. And there's numerous other people since it's limited to just 4 weekends. But the Weebles, the landowners, actually leave out a couple chairs for you to enjoy and fill out the summit register. And I actually went out of my way to go meet them after reading about them. And kind of like what Greg was talking about, have some people where you can meet the locals, and that makes it these trips really enjoyable. They were very amicable. And this was Mrs. Weeble's collection. She's got coffee cups from all over the US, but she was missing Louisiana, was the last one she still didn't have. So the best part about high pointing is driving through America's farmland. And it is rich and scenic. And I didn't understand this photo. I do realize people use scarecrows, but I didn't quite understand what the point of this one was. In Wisconsin, Timms Hill has a tower as their high point. And that was a lot of fun. And there's a lot of history to be read about doing these high points. And I enjoyed that, looking at all the people around this country and what they've had to live through. One of the goals for me was to spend some time with my wife, and we had a desire to go from Wisconsin onto Michigan, and this is the Grand Hotel on Mackinac Island. And this is where the movie Somewhere in Time was filmed with Christopher Reeves and Jane Seymour. And one thing that's interesting on this island is there's no motorized vehicle. Only bicycles or horses are your transportation options, or feet. We went to the Picture Rocks National Lakeshore, which is a beautiful area on the southern shore of Lake Superior. But we drove across Michigan and ended up getting to Mount Arvon, which is way back in the boonies near Lance Township. And this is one I would say avoid in the winter, because I don't see how you can get back there with snow-covered roads. After Michigan, we went to Minnesota, the land of 10,000 lakes. And this area reminded me of the film On Golden Pond with Peter Fonda and Katharine Hepburn. Because that morning, it looked just like some of the scenes in that film. And I actually had the opportunity and joy of hearing the loons making their morning noises, which was very reminiscent of hearing that from the movie. And this state high point takes you into the Boundary Waters Wilderness, which was actually quite awesome to be able to do. And on the summit of Eagle Mountain, yes, there still has the Minnesota mosquitoes, which are famous for. So they were in full force. But we spent a couple nights at the Lutsen Resort on the north shore of Lake Superior. And this was one of the most magical moments. Sitting there drinking an adult beverage, we got to witness right over our heads a bald eagle, which was just surprising. Eagle Mountain and a bald eagle flew over right afterwards. And I don't know how this happened, but on a dry, sunny day, right in front of us, we got this. So a couple of magic moments, which just makes these trips really enjoyable when things like this happen. So I can just say it spoke to us. How about Hawaii? I guess I should include this. I took this picture sitting on the shore of Hilo during our trip, and this is in 2017. when my wife and I went to Hawaii to celebrate our 30th wedding anniversary. And so I had some friends that lived in Hilo, and my friend Jeff went with me, but however, he wasn't acclimatized, and so he didn't make it. So I went on up solo, and he caught a ride on the road with a tourist that actually gave him a ride back down. And after this high point, this was our dinner table that evening with our friends. And like the MasterCard commercial, priceless. Where else do you get dining room floor like this? So I'm going to move on. I'm going to save Denali for last. And this trip in 2018 to New England was just one of the most beautiful that I need to point out as well, because my wife and I did this trip again to celebrate our anniversary, and it had a triple purpose: the anniversary celebration, to go see New England in the fall, and to do some state high pointing. So we hit it in the beautiful change of the colors, and this is up on the side of Katahdin in Baxter State Park. And I did Maine's High Point as a solo climb. So this past September, I took a trip back east to get my, I was actually going for 9 out of the 10 I had left. And so with COVID, we decided to drive instead of flying. One of my selfies that I took, we took a drive from Colorado all the way across to Pennsylvania, then south along the Appalachian Mountains, and ended up getting 9 state high points. And those Appalachian Mountains are windy, but they are worth exploring. So we finally made it all the way down to Florida. We initially were planning just to turn from Tennessee and come on back home, but we decided with this COVID, we might get shut down in winter when we were actually planning to go to Florida. So we went ahead and drove all the way down, ended up having to do 3,400 miles of driving to do 10 for 10, but it worked. It was worth it. I saved Britton Hill for my finisher because it's spelled just like my name, Britton. So a whopping 345 feet above sea level, and I can say it is finished. I stood on all 50 state high points. September 22nd at 3:15 p.m. is when I got this. So Debbie wanted her summit. My wife wanted to spend some time on the beach. So this is a picture I took when we had a beautiful sunset right on the beach, and we had some sunrises right on the beach because we ended up spending 3 days on the Florida coast. So she got her summit, and I got mine, and now I'll take you on to Denali. Just like Darren Funk Neubauer mentioned when he explained Denali at one of the CMC monthly meetings, he says it's hard to imagine the scale, and I would agree. So when I am explaining Denali to people, I show them this picture. This is what the 14ers in Colorado look like. Here's Denali. So you can just imagine sticking like Pikes Peak on top of the 14ers, and then that's where the Denali ends up being. This mountain took a lot of training to get in shape. I wasn't used to pulling a sled, so we did a lot of training hikes. So this is on Berthig Pass to get our body used to hauling a sled. This is on the backside of Pikes Peak, a big cornice. So we did some training, lowering over the edge of that cornice and having to get back up. And so practicing our crevasse skills. When you do Rainier, you only have a backpack. When you do Denali, you also have a sled, which adds complexity to a crevasse rescue. So we went to the Philip S. Miller City Park in Castle Rock, where we trained getting out of a crevasse with the pack and the sled dangling from the rope. So we had to figure out and learn how to extricate ourselves when you got that mess all attached to you. And this tower was a perfect place to be able to go work on that. So the flight into Denali is worth the price of admission alone. Just a stunning place. And this is the Kahiltna International Airport at 7,000 feet. We landed at 6:30 p.m. after a 27-minute flight, which was shorter than I thought it was going to be. So we hung around there in camp until 10:30 at night, and then we took off, and we decided to wait so that we could hike during the cool of the evening so the snow would refreeze, which would help hopefully prevent snow bridges from breaking through. So just a few pictures from Denali. I have this as well as many of the other state high points on 14ers.com as trip reports if you're looking for beta or interested. This picture is from our 11,000 foot camp. You get all kind of weather on this mountain, but we were extremely fortunate. This is going up Motorcycle Hill out of 11,000 camp in the clouds, but we only got snowed on twice. And the one day that we got over a foot of snow, it was actually a planned rest day. So we were never stopped by the weather. This is Basin Camp at 14,200 feet. And this is just a stunning place. This is Mount Forker in the background at 17,402. We took 2 identical Nemo Chagori tents, which worked out great because they were 3-man tents. So we each had 2 people in 3-man tents, which gave us plenty of room to spread out all our gear. During the downtime, I actually got to read a complete book, which was awesome to have the time to be able to rest and read a whole book. To me, the most stunning viewpoint of the entire trip was up on the ridge above 14er camp. You can see the 14 camp down on that flat mesa below. And yet the steep head wall that runs up above 14er camp puts you on this ridge, which goes from 16,000 to 17,000 feet. And this was the highlight for me, even though this head wall was tough. It was the hardest part of the trip for me. It's very, very steep. And we had to do it numerous times because we did a cache. But this was harder than I expected it to be. It wore me out, I will say. But this is on that ridge, and you can see how steep it is in places, and it's the most incredible place on the whole route, in my opinion. A tech tip here is using a mega mid. It was highly recommended to us. And so this was our camp kitchen, because if your tent catches fire, your expedition is over. You will be going home. Won't have any carbon monoxide gas buildup inside your tent. And it provides a place for social engagement where the whole team can come together, get together and converse. So the Mega Mid is a great piece of gear to haul. So this is again on the final trek up to 17 camp along the ridge. And again, it's just amazing is all I can say. And we scored an igloo that someone had made. This was our camp kitchen up at 17 camp because we didn't bring the Mega Mid up there. So this was pretty cool to experience and use an igloo. On climb day, this is the view to the south over Pig Hill. We actually helped save a life on this trip that you can read about, a Japanese climber, in the trip report if you're interested. And the famous or infamous Final Summit Ridge. This is such a classic shot and place. And this is where, for me, the exhilaration came swooping in, that we were actually going to make it. And we did. Denali Summit marker at 20,310 feet. This was the trip of a lifetime, I will say. And a summit selfie showing all 4 of us with the CMC banner right over the summit marker. And Thomas took this on our down climb, which is just a cool picture. But once we got back down to 14er camp, we spent a full day resting and a night. And then we headed down at 8:30 p.m., which was again all through the night, and it allowed us to be on the lower glacier during the middle of the night, the cool of the evening. And we arrived back at base camp at 5 a.m. the next morning. Biggest piece of advice I would say is picking the right team members. It's a huge part of the process and being successful, I would say. And all I can say is I picked extremely well. So I'm sure many of you know that I have a faith component to my life. And these are some of the scriptures that helped me change my mindset along this journey. Because at one point, I wasn't going to do Denali. It scared the poo out of me. if you can't read these, which is probably hard, you can see them on, again, they're at the end of the trip report. My username is Globril, short for my business name, which is Global Reality. So if you're going to go climb some state high points, there's a beta on Summit Post, which is where I got the majority of my detailed information on how to find these state high points. And then these trip reports I've put up has information that supplements what's in Summit Post. So there you go, 50 state high points, mission accomplished. I don't know what's next.
So Britt, what was from start to finish? How many years?
When I did Harney Peak in South Dakota, that was 2013. And that was kind of about the time when I thought about it. But I wasn't sure of Denali, so at least 7 years. But Mount Elbert was in 2008, but it wasn't a goal at that point. Wasn't even a thought in 2008.
Awesome, that's great. Couple questions that came through.
Okay.
From Joe, which of the high points was unexpectedly better than you thought it was going to be?
Oh my gosh, a lot of them. I mean, really, a lot of them. Kings Peak, Bora, Whitney. I mean, and those are the real mountains. And of course, I mentioned Montana and Wyoming. But to be honest, driving through rural America, so many adventures that aren't in this PowerPoint of places that Debbie and I ended up going. We stayed in some bed and breakfasts and that Lutsen Resort. And so just going to backcountry America, that is a huge high point. I went to places I never would have gone to otherwise if it hadn't been for this goal.
Very cool. Which high point had the best restaurant or craft beer?
Oh man, that's hard to say because I've been known to drink a beer pretty much every state, and it would be hard to judge. Actually, if you read my Denali trip report, part 1 talks about my demons. The drinking is something that I have to be careful of because I've been known to overdo it. And so, to be honest, on the year leading up to Denali, I abstained for almost that whole time period, which was a huge challenge. So I would say that's probably the best thing as far as beer goes, the being able to have the willpower to abstain for that long period of time, as opposed to say, here's the best craft beer I had. So there's an honest answer to the question.
Thanks. A question from Alan. Have you climbed much in foreign countries?
No, I didn't get into mountaineering until late in my life. I was 48 when I started the 14ers. And over my business career, being a filmmaker, I've been in 74 different countries around the world. And some of them many times, like I've been to Kenya 12 times. And unfortunately, I didn't have mountaineering in my sights when I was doing all that traveling, because that would have been awesome to get Kilimanjaro while I was right there in Tanzania and so forth. But I never had that in my sights or goals.
A question from Greg Long. Do you have a favorite among the flat states?
Oh boy, I have to think about it. But rewinded that last question. I did go and did 4 volcanoes in Mexico training. I mean, I wanted to see how my body would do at elevation. So I did Pico de Orizaba in Mexico, which I actually got AMS. So that did teach me that I was going to make darn sure I was going to acclimatize for Denali. So we followed Hoot and Kevin Baker's trip plan and spent 5 days in 14er camp. So doing an international climb, that was where I got that beta. Favorite low point? Probably Florida, just because it ended up with a magical 3 days on the beach.
Awesome.
Yeah, having that time with my wife was something that was needed, because I will say I came to learn in my climbing career that I became extremely selfish in going after my climbing goals. And so I needed many times to be reminded of what's important, and it's my wife and time with her. And I need to be less selfish and more selfless.
Awesome. That's great. If anybody else has some final questions, put them in the comments. Otherwise, awesome presentation, Britt. Thank you very much. Everybody is saying how great it was and what great photos you had too. So, fantastic job. Thank you. Yeah, everybody. Great job for Britt for stepping in and doing our little presentation, doing all the Zoom and everything.